Well, let's talk playoffs. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL playoffs. I'd like to talk about the various scenarios that we're dealing with in this week 17. But first, a general outline of the playoffs, because I've had a couple of requests over the last few days for an explanation of the NFL playoffs, the format, and so forth. It's very easy. 6 teams in the AFC, 6 teams in the NFC, 12 teams in total qualify for the playoffs. That's the 4 division winners. Keep in mind there's 4 divisions in both the AFC and the NFC. So the 4 division winners. And the next 2 teams with the best records called the wild card teams. So, for example, in the AFC field has been set. The 4 division winners are Houston, Denver, New England, and Baltimore. And the 2 wild card teams, the teams with the next 2 best records, are Indianapolis and Cincinnati. Now, the team with the best record in each conference, in the AFC and the NFC, they get home field advantage, meaning they get to play every game at their home stadium throughout the playoffs until the Super Bowl, of course, which is played at a neutral site. This year it's in New Orleans. The top 2 teams in each conference get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, the first week. So next week, this obviously being week 17, the playoffs begin next week. The top 2 seeds in each conference will not play. Obviously, it's a big deal to secure a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Now, if it ended today, the byes in the AFC would go to Houston and Denver. If it ended today, the byes in the NFC would go to Atlanta and Green Bay. That could change this Sunday, but it's unlikely because it would require Denver losing to Kansas City, or at least it's unlikely in the AFC because Denver's probably not going to lose to Kansas City. If the Broncos did happen to lose to the Chiefs, then New England could sneak in that first round bye with a win. In the NFC, though, the Green Bay Packers are going to have to win on the road in Minnesota, a game the Vikings desperately need if they want to make the playoffs. The Packers are going to need that game if they want to secure a first-round bye, so far from a done deal there. If the Packers lose to Minnesota, then the San Francisco 49ers, as long as they take care of business against Arizona, and they're favored by more than 2 touchdowns to do so. So we expect San Francisco to beat the Cardinals, and they could sneak in there and get the first-round bye should Green Bay lose. Now in the AFC, as we said, the 6-team field is decided. If it ended today, Houston would be the number 1 seed, secure home field throughout. Now, if the Texans lose on the road in Indianapolis on Sunday, and the Texans have never won in Indianapolis in the history of their franchise, keep in mind, though, most of those games were with Peyton Manning leading the Indianapolis offense, but if the Texans lose on the road in Indianapolis, then the Denver Broncos will get home field in the AFC if they beat the Kansas City Chiefs, which they most likely will. So, big game on Sunday for Houston on the road in Indianapolis because, listen, Denver's hotter than the Houston Texans right now. There's no question about it. There's no hotter team in the NFL than the Denver Broncos. I think Houston has a much, much better chance of beating the Broncos if that game is in Houston than out at Mile High Stadium in January. So, huge game for the Texans on Sunday in Indianapolis. Interesting thing, the Colts, they've already locked up their seed. I mean, win or lose, the Colts are going to be the 5 seed in the playoffs. And we've heard their coaching staff say, of course, I was about to say Bruce Arians because he's been their coach throughout most of the year, but Chuck Pagano is back this week. Chuck Pagano, the Indianapolis coach who was diagnosed with leukemia in September and has missed most of the season, he is returning to the sidelines this week. So it'll be interesting to see if Chuck Pagano decides to play all his regulars. A lot of times you'll see in situations like this where teams face meaningless games, and they'll try to keep their best players healthy for the playoffs. There are 4 teams, by the way, in situations like that this weekend: Baltimore, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Atlanta. All 4 of those teams are playoff teams who might be resting players this Sunday, so keep that in mind if you're going to be betting on games involving those teams. Now, for what it's worth, all 4 of those teams' head coaches have said they won't be resting their players and they'll be trying to win the game. We'll see if that holds true as those games progress. But anyway, if it ended today, it would be Houston at number 1 in the AFC, Denver at number 2. As we said, that could flip-flop. New England at number 3. New England could move up to the number 2 spot should Denver lose to Kansas City. Baltimore, the 4 seed. Indianapolis has locked up the 5th seed, and Cincinnati is going to be the 6th seed. So that's your AFC playoff field. The NFC, Atlanta has locked up home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So the road to the Super Bowl, at least in the NFC, is going to go through Atlanta. Somebody is going to have to go in there and beat the Falcons, which is a very tough thing to do, except, of course, I guess in the playoffs. Remember, Matt Ryan yet to win a playoff game in Atlanta. I have a feeling that might change this season. The number 2 seed, if it ended today, would be Green Bay, but as we said, the Packers have to win in Minnesota on Friday to hang on to that number 2 seed. And remember, the 2 seed is crucial because you get a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Should the Packers lose, as we said, the San Francisco 49ers will take the 2 seed in the first round bye as long as they take care of business against Arizona. Now, the biggest game of this Sunday, the biggest game of this Week 17 Sunday is Dallas-Washington. It's the Sunday night game. That's because the winner is in. The winner makes the playoffs and wins the NFC East. The loser is out, most likely. If the loser is Dallas, they're out for sure. Dallas has to win and they're in. If Washington loses, they could still get in, but it's unlikely. Minnesota and Chicago would have to both lose. The Bears are favorites against the 4-11 Detroit Lions. So basically, it's win and you're in for both Dallas and Washington. That should be a great game. Whoever wins that game will win the NFC East, as we said, and will be the 4 seed in the NFC playoffs. The Seattle Seahawks, probably as hot as any team in the NFL right now. They've locked up a playoff berth in the 5 seed. So long as San Francisco doesn't lose to Arizona. If the 49ers happen to lose the Arizona Cardinals, and I believe San Francisco is a 15-point favorite or something like that, so it'd be a stunner if it happened. But if that does happen and Seattle wins this weekend, and they're a double-digit favorite over the St. Louis Rams, then the Seahawks would win the NFC West. That would be huge for them because they're so much better at home than they are on the road. But that's most likely not going to happen. So Seattle, they've locked up a playoff spot. They probably will be the 5 seed. As far as the 6 seed goes, the final playoff spot in the NFC, we mentioned the Minnesota Vikings. If they beat Green Bay this weekend at home, the short home underdogs, they will get in as the 6th seed. Should the Vikings lose, the Chicago Bears will get in with a win over the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Chicago's a short road favorite in that game, but the Lions have been playing awful lately. You would think that the Bears were going to win that game. It's so crucial for them. But the Bears could get in there still if Minnesota loses to Green Bay. The New York Giants, even though they've been playing terribly recently, probably as poorly as any team in the NFL outside of the very worst teams like Kansas City and the Arizona Cardinals, teams like that. But the Giants can still get in. The Giants have to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Keep in mind, Michael Vick is back this week for Philadelphia. And the Giants need Dallas, Minnesota, and Chicago to all lose. So it's unlikely, no doubt, but Dallas and Minnesota are both underdogs, and Chicago is playing on the road against a division rival. So it's conceivable the New York Giants could make the playoffs. So there you have it. Those are all your playoff possibilities for this Week 17. And I hope that clarified the format for you if you had any questions about that. Maybe it didn't. I know sometimes the way I say it makes it sound more confusing than it actually is. It's really very, very simple. Playoffs begin next week. The 2 wild card teams will play in the stadiums of the 2 division winners who don't have the best record, while the 2 division winners who do have the best record get a bye in each conference. I said it's very simple. That probably made it sound more complicated than ever. Anyway, if you have any more questions or want me to elaborate any further, feel free to drop me a comment or send me an email, john@betdaqnfl.com, and I'll be happy to respond to you. We're going to put some of these video previews for these Week 17 games up here over the next few hours. We hope you enjoy them. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.